partner showcase area, and we'll have ample time to spend out there over our lunch break. But before we get on to our next presenter, I want to take a moment just to remind you, this is what the survey looks like, that we are really eager to get your feedback. So if you would, throughout the course of the day, please make sure you're jotting down notes on this so that we can continue to improve these events as we go forward. So our next speaker joins us from Forrester Research, Jay McBain, Principal Analyst of Global Channels. Jay brings a ton of experience around the channel ecosystem, and he will talk about his background and the work that he's done. It's very interesting. This is the first analyst I've ever seen that's specifically focused on this piece of the business. So I'm really excited to hear what Jay has to say about differentiating yourselves in an ever-changing marketplace that we're in. So I'm very happy to introduce Jay McBain.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'm pleased to be able to speak with you today. So I've spent most of my career thinking about you. I think about the channel industry, I think about distributors and vendors and customers and how it all works. But the one thing that gives me great pleasure is that 3/4 of the world is indirect. There are channels across all 27 industries. So you think the last car you bought through a dealer, the last TV you bought was probably from a retailer, the last jar of peanut butter you bought was probably from a grocer. So most of your life is indirect, and every industry has the same thing. In our US space, there's 162,000 companies that call themselves IT resellers, or VARs, or solution providers, or MSPs, or there's another list of 12 other names. They go down to one person, all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. Very diverse. Globally, it's over 600,000. So you'd think with this great big channel industry, this wonderful place that we all work in every day, this is my Rodney Dangerfield slide, that there'd be a big backup of knowledge and information and places that we could go. Can anyone guess how many books on Amazon there is about channel or indirect sales? Anyone? Not a lot. You would think with 75% of the world, we'd have a little bit of better coverage. So this is where I spend my time thinking and looking at how things are happening. But the channel is in a very interesting space right now, and I'll give some demographics later on in terms of what's happening, but it's shrinking. And it's shrinking for a couple of reasons. One is that, it's aging out a little bit. For those partners that started with IBM in 1982 or started with Microsoft in 1992. There doesn't seem to be a move of millennials in to replace these jobs. Even family businesses, the kids don't want to do what mom and dad did, running cables and fixing computers and putting toner in printers and things like that. But there's another reason why traditional channels are struggling in this marketplace. And for the first time, there's been a major shift in how customers make technology decisions. The channel's been resilient in terms of technology changes. You can think through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, dozens and dozens of technology shifts. It was even resilient through financial shifts, changing to a recurring revenue model, business models, financial models. But this changing customer journey is having a bigger impact than any of those. And I promise, because I'm at Forrester, I've actually been at Forrester 30 days, so I'm at the same tenure as the CEO of Rackspace. But before this, I ran a startup doing artificial intelligence in the channel, doing mobility and social. Before that, I was a channel chief at Lenovo, at IBM. So I've been around this game almost 23 years. But I promised Forrester that I would at least show one chart. But over 2/3 of decisions now, from a customer perspective on technology, and this is a software slide, are being made outside of IT. And that's interesting, but there's one number that I watch, and I'm not sure if you can read that, but there's 29% of decisions now that are actually made by line of business executives without IT. So, when you look at IT coming in to give sage advice and to be the adult in the room, security, backup, disaster recovery, compliance, all these great things, 30% of the cases it's not happening. And this number is rising quickly. So I wanted to, dig into that number a little bit. And, we know that business leaders make decisions a little bit differently, and they focus on business objectives. They focus on their problems. They've got KPIs, their job is on the line, and they build in technology to, fix and to be able to make those KPIs and run their departments better. There's actually an interesting stat that I read the other day that over half of these business leaders are now spending their own budgets on technology. So not only are they not going to the IT department for budget or help or support, they're actually just spending their own money now on technology. There's no differentiation between running marketing or sales or operations, finance, HR from an overall perspective. So they're trading off people, resources, technology. They're running it as their own P&L, and they don't make that delineation. Another thing that I thought was interesting, 58% of them are actually hiring channels. So they're building partnerships, they're building alliances, they're building what I call the room. Who are they inviting into the room when they're looking at technology, when they're planning, when they're buying, when they're implementing, integrating? 58% of them are now hiring partners. So they're looking for full solutions, full service, full solutions, and they're building the projects, they're running the projects, and they are taking responsibility for making sure that these technologies are integrated, implemented, secured, everything else, end to end, which is a big change. 18 months ago, I would have stood up here and said something very, very different. 10 years ago, less than 10% of decisions were made outside of IT. Back then, we called it shadow IT or rogue IT, if you remember that. Well, now it's the new normal. So something that's been a byproduct of that is this changing buyer, but the changing buyer behavior. So a lot of them, Forrester wrote a really interesting piece of research, and it was titled, a little bit of a clickbait title, but it was The Death of a B2B Salesperson. And we've heard of robotics and AI and machine learning, and all of us, 47% of us are going to be replaced at some point with robots. But this was a little bit different in that these business leaders would rather do it themselves. They're doing the pre-research online, we know that. They're working through different methods, and I'm going to talk about shadow channels in a minute that they're leveraging. But they're doing much more of the work beforehand than just calling up an expert to say, hey, this is my problem, can you fix it? And one of the metrics that I'm looking at as a bellwether, and this actually comes from the National Association of Electrical Distributors, is the purchases through distribution. So back in the day, distribution would be given and work with you as partners to be given a complex problem, and they would piece together a solution. Hardware, software, services, other types of things would come together to make a solution. Well, 68% of the cases now, it's coming in at a part number level. So very simplified, transactional, and they're just fulfilling. And this number is rising as well. They think it's going to be 80% transactional within a couple of years, meaning a lot of the work is done beforehand and a lot of the work is done self-service. So the more tools that a customer can get to provision or to research or to add things to their stack are done, if they can, by themselves. So this is the one thing that's popped up again in the last 18 months that I've, going to spend a lot of time studying. We're building a big report right now, but I want to give you kind of the, where things may be in 3 to 5 years. When they're looking at a solution, think of yourself as a VP of marketing, and you're just been hired in ambulatory care clinic in upstate New York, and your KPI is to drive more leads. So what do you do as in that position? You start to build a peer network, you start to build up your knowledge base, you start to do this. And there are 5 new types of what I call shadow channels that are being invited into the room to do critical IT work. And I just want to walk through who those are. One is the SaaS ecosystem players. And I have a picture of Salesforce here, but it could easily be a NetSuite, it could be a Marketo, it could be a Workday. You look across the 10 lines of business, there are several winners today in the SaaS ecosystem, but there are new partners that have set up their entire world in that space. And really what they're chasing is $4.14 of downstream revenue. So every time Salesforce sells $1 of license revenue or sells $1 of recurring revenue of any type, there's $4 downstream, integrating, implementing, securing, and all the change orders that go with it. That $4.14 is at an 80% margin right now. To find a good Salesforce person in your town is about a 6-month wait. It's a kind of a gold mine, and I liken it back to being a CNE in the late 80s or a MCSE in the early 90s. You can write your own ticket, and that's what they're doing now. So Salesforce has 695 global partners that stay in their ecosystem, and they're driving $20 billion of revenue right now at 80% margins. And companies in the SaaS world are investing for them to hire and certify more people as quickly as possible. They just can't do it fast enough, and it's gating some of these SaaS companies' growth that they just can't get the services fast enough. The second one is by surprise. I said that there's 27 industries. There's 27, well, actually there's more than this, professional services organizations that have served these industries, since the start of time. I want to talk about 3 examples that just illustrate what I'm talking about. So accounting and financial companies, there are 150,000 of them in the US. I mentioned there's 162,000 IT partners. It's almost the same amount. Over 50% of them now sell technology, service technology, and if you look at their websites, they're indistinguishable from the IT channel. It's compliance, it's back end, it's disaster recovery, it's all these wonderful services, and you're trying to dig through to find out that they actually started as being an accounting company selling Great Plains back in the day. And that number is actually growing to 80%. So when they were surveyed by CompTIA, the biggest IT association, 80% of them said by 2020, they're going to be IT companies. So our channel just doubled. You look at legal, has 110,000 legal companies that are now selling software, doing the services, doing the technology. Marketing, so you look in the old advertising agencies, became digital agencies, now are IT companies. And their skill sets may not be there, and they're using customers as kind of guinea pigs as they come along, but we're seeing a lot of acquisitions, you buying digital agencies, because they've got a tie-in to the VP of marketing that you may not have. So very interesting to look, and by the way, there's 24 other examples that number in the tens of thousands of companies that if you go to their websites now, they look like IT companies. The third is the ISVs, and Rackspace has a very solid ISV program. I call these the ISVs that layer on top of the SaaS ecosystem. So they add value by taking a Marketo, for example, our VP of marketing example. They take Marketo and make it very selective and specific to a mid-size 50-doctor clinic. And so they're the level of customization. It's kind of the last mile if you think in telco terms. That if you wanted to, you could install Marketo or Salesforce or one of these SaaS ecosystems and go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars customizing it to your workflows and how you do business. Or there's probably an ISV that's gone and done that for you for $19 a month per employee. So your ability to buy that layer is much more prevalent. By the way, there's almost 100,000 technology companies now. So these are vendors and brands that are solving customer solutions that have branded themselves on the internet. The fourth one is interesting, and you like my born in the cloud dude? So he's sitting back, enjoying life. But these are new companies, and I spoke at the Ingram Cloud conference, and there's 3,000 of them in the room. And it's interesting because they're not encumbered with a previous business model. They've never sold hardware. They've never sold traditional software. They've never done break-fix or any kind of traditional managed services. They build themselves to this future. So they understand at some point there has to be an adult in the room. You've got these SaaS people and ISV people and professional services firms. You have to keep your CEO out of jail. You don't have a long tenure as a VP of marketing when your CEO goes to jail for something, especially in healthcare. So they actually do a lot of these IT services, and they build it in a different fashion that they're highly profitable. And the people that they hire and the way the company was created was exactly to do this: participate at the line of business decision-making part of the equation. And then the fifth, and kind of an interesting one, and I ran a startup for the last 5 years, is there are tens of thousands of startups, 4,000 of them that are VC-backed, that are trying to get their first logos. So they're trying to get their way into that room to hang out with the other people, but they've got some widget. It doesn't have to be software. It could be a beacon. It could be something that helps a mid-sized clinic get more customers, get more leads. So they're in there with the ISV and the SaaS ecosystem and everybody else. They're playing nice. They're ready to give away all their services, do custom programming, do whatever necessary. And I lived this, to get your first few logos, to get your next shot of VC investment, to keep going. So how are these shadow channels, these 5 types of channels, finding success? And the answer is hyper-specialization, or what I call vectorization. I just make up words. It helps you when you do Google search. So I want to step us back to our job. We've all been hired as a VP of marketing at this mid-size ambulatory care clinic. Congratulations. Now find some new patients. What does hyper-specialization look like to you? So when you're sitting at your desk and you're ready to bring people into your room to help you with driving leads, well, this is what it looks like. The permutations and combinations of specialization. You remember decades ago, we all focused on verticalization? I'm going to go read HIPAA and high tech, and I'm going to be a healthcare expert. I'm going to go read Sarbanes-Oxley and a few other things, and I'm going to become a financial industry expert. Well, that's gone away. To drive leads in a mid-sized clinic, whether you've read HIPAA and high tech or not, are irrelevant. So what I showed in terms of shadow channels is the customer's not inviting, the person out front installing new toner in the printer, or the person running cables. The traditional managed service provider or IT provider at the customer isn't in the room because there's a perception that they don't know how to drive leads. So if you look at these 5 vectors, when I said 27 industries, it's more important to look at the sub-industries. There are people that specialize in this case, mid-sized clinics. The fact that you've driven leads in a big hospital, maybe not so relevant. You've driven leads for a small dentist's office with a couple dentists, maybe not as relevant. They need that specific skill. And again, when you start looking at these things, they may fly somebody in with those skills, put them up at a hotel and pay airfare, rather than somebody who's more of a generalist. So I want to see that you've done this before at 10 other mid-sized clinics, and you can hit the ground running. 10 lines of business, from sales, marketing, operations, finance, manufacturing, etc. 50 geographies, that's states. But if you look internationally, you can up that number pretty fast. But the fact that you've driven leads in upstate New York, there's nuances to that from a regulatory, government, compliance that's different than New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Texas and California and everywhere else. So that specific type of skill is very important. You look at segments. I said, big hospitals down to small dentist office. I want somebody that's done it in my situation. And then the technologies. So in this case, you're going to be putting in marketing automation. You're probably going to build a stack with some ISVs and some startups and a bunch of things. I would love that I'm not your guinea pig. That you've done this before, you know what works, you know what doesn't. You've kind of lived the pain and suffering on somebody else's dime. I have you coming in and you're going to have this thing installed and all the ins and outs of it. So if you add all that or multiply all that together, there's 35 million vectors. So if you went home today and made a strategic plan in your organization, we're going to specialize in 35 million places. It's just not going to happen. So you got to start thinking about your business a little bit differently. Who do you need to partner with and align with? What capabilities do you need to build? Looking at your past customers and your past successes, instead of just looking at what vertical they were in, start looking at the 5 vectors And there's a little bit of a heat map that comes up. You're not going to have 35 million cells on this chart, but where are the specific places that you've had success, and how can you broaden that nationally or internationally? You know, you're now that expert in mid-sized clinics that's going to have people flying around, you know, fixing all of these situations globally. And you're going to be taking over the traditional IT channel, which are mostly generalists. So I said I would mention demographics, and I spent, if you fanatical being the measure of the day, I'm fanatical about this. There's no company or organization around the world that counts channel partners. It's all at an estimate. And you look at government, you look at the biggest magazine in our industry is CRN. They have the biggest database of readers. CompTIA is the biggest IT association in the world. So I look at every source possible to try to, when I say 162,000, it's an educated guess, but I'm probably wrong by 5% on either side, just because of the motion. The first stat is a 36% decline in the channel since 2008. So every industry was pretty severely impacted in 2008 with the economic recession or depression. The channel didn't rebound. You see unemployment, you see the stock market, all other measures seem to have rebounded since 2008, except for the channel. And there's a couple of measures of this. You know, one is that you know, you look at large channel programs like an HP or a IBM, Microsoft, etc. And if you just run a simple Microsoft Excel search on their website, you can do this yourself, and see how many are active. Most have dropped by 30% if you take their 2008 list. And there hasn't been a large movement into the industry, which I'll talk about in 1 minute. Now that it's dropped by 36%, a major survey went out and asked all the remaining partners, what's up? And 40% of them said that they're retiring by 2024. So when I said that the channel is aging itself out, again, the ones that started in 82 or 92 are now in their late 50s, early 60s. Not a bunch of people ready to buy their business. For smaller channel partners, 8 or less employees, the M&A situation isn't good right now. You've got people that thought that their retirement was selling their business, and they're finding out that their business multiple isn't there, and that anybody who would buy their business, they would have to work in that business. They're buying them more than they are buying their business. So it's a pretty, and these are entrepreneurs, so there's no 401k, there's no investment strategy along the way. This was their life. And so the level of anxiety and the level of stress, if you go to larger, you know, just generic channel events, is in the room. And then the final one was a research done by CompTIA. 75% of the channel by 2024 will be millennials. But what's happened in the last 18 months, you know, we all thought when this research came out a few years ago that, you know, millennials would just come in and become IT partners, and you know, whether they came out of telco or pro AV or print or wherever they came and they converge into IT partners, it's just not happening. First of all, millennials are going to work in technology, but now you can work everywhere. So every company in every industry is now a technology company. You're being disrupted by Uber, you're being disrupted by Airbnb, you think of your industry and the disruption. Every company, including this hotel, has had to become a technology company. So if you want to work in tech, you just go work for any company, and you can work in tech. The second thing is the gold mine over in the SaaS ecosystems and the shadow channels that I talked about. If you think of installing printers and you know, traditional IT services, managed services and those types of things, or you think of the sexiness of chasing $4 of downstream revenue at 80% margins, flying around the world as an expert and, you know, living in that world, that seems to be where the millennial push is going. Born in the cloud, SaaS ecosystems, ISVs, startups, etc. So this is kind of all the entire things that I talked about on one slide. And I call it, you know, a risk factor, but it's an opportunity for everyone in this room that, you know, moving through technology changes, the channel's been resilient. You know, we're going to be ready for the next crank of the technology and the next one after that. We thought that the business model change was going to cause major disruption. So going to managed services, completely changing your business to recurring revenue, getting out of the old break-fix world, we thought that that would have a major, major impact, and that the channel was resilient. But this change is the one that's the weakness of the traditional, and I'm talking small partners in this case, is sales and marketing. So what we're asking is, instead of just the IT department, you now have to call on 10 more people and departments at your customer and at your prospects. So your marketing and sales challenge just got multiplied by 10, and most would say that this is their greatest weakness. So this is why this change is different than the others. The other one is lack of sophistication. You know, we've had some vertical skills, but mostly general. We can do all things to all people all the time, has been what the industry has been built on. But now when you talk vectors, where do you get invited into the room, if at all? And do you spend your time in IT where 30% of the cases, IT is not even involved anymore? And this business isn't going away. This isn't a magazine where I'm trying to sell a clickbait article here saying the channel's dying. But what happens is, you know, with all the traditional hardware and software going down by single double digits, and you looking to retire by 2024, this is kind of just a slide-off end game. And without the sophistication, without the hyper-specialized skills, you'll be invited into less and less rooms. And then this kind of goes to the aging channel. Do you have the will, the energy, the enthusiasm? I mean, when the internet came in the mid-90s, and e-commerce and on-demand computing and all the stuff that Rackspace has done for a long time, which has just been phenomenal. And then the announcements happening today and tomorrow. In that position in your career, in that position in your company, will there be an SMB channel going forward? And what's it going to look like? So this is my last slide, and it's, you know, kind of ending on this conundrum. You can't be 35 million places at once. So looking at your own organization, looking at where your specialties are on the heat map, how do you build out those further, whether it's geographic or how do you swim in adjacent lanes? You know, a mid-sized clinic, creep up, maybe creep down from there, creep over from New York to New Jersey. There's certain places, you know, new technologies you can bring on. There's ways that you expand the heat map on those places that you specialize. But as you look to do this, do you look to build those capabilities? Do you partner with those 5 shadow channels that are in the room today? Do you acquire them? Do you merge with them? We're seeing all of the above, and I've seen all of the above be done successfully. But for yourselves, it's a business model discussion. It's a, you know, company discussion. Is what do you do in the next 3 to 5 years, assuming all these numbers are going to continue to grow, which I believe they are. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you sticking it out with me.